My parents wanted me to marry someone who was equal in wealth and status, so I had to give up a very meaningful, long-distance relationship by throwing myself into another potential relationship. Growing up in an affluent family where lineage and legacy were as crucial as the air we breathed, I, Doria, always knew that expectations loomed large over every decision. My parents, both scions of venerable families, held not just wealth but a certain status that came with responsibilities and unspoken rules. In the circles we frequented, gala dinners, charity balls, and high-profile weddings, every interaction was subtly underscored by considerations of social standing and marital alliances. My parents, both products of similarly strategic marriages, seemed content or at least compliant with the life they had constructed together. From a young age, they impressed upon me that marriage was as much about enhancing familial ties and securing economic stability as it was about personal compatibility. It's not just whom you marry, my father would often say, but what that union brings to the family that matters. Amidst this backdrop of opulent expectation, I met Darren during a study abroad program in college. Unlike my high society acquaintances back home, Darren came from a modest background and carried an air of freedom that was both alluring and terrifying to someone like me. Our connection was instantaneous and profound. We shared long conversations into the night, dreams of a future unconstrained by the rigid frameworks of our upbringings. But as our semester abroad waned, the reality of maintaining a relationship over thousands of miles began to set in. Our connection deepened with each passing day, fostered by the shared discovery of a foreign land and the exhilarating freedom it offered from our usual constraints. We were two souls, unburdened by the expectations that typically defined our lives back home. In Darren, I found not just a partner, but a kindred spirit who understood my quirks and dreams. Our love was a vibrant tapestry of shared adventures, late-night conversations under starlit skies, and promises of a future together. However, as the program neared its end, the reality of our geographical separation loomed large. Returning to our respective countries, thousands of miles apart, introduced the first major test of our relationship. The challenges were manifold. Time differences and conflicting schedules often turned our attempts at communication into exercises of patience and persistence. The physical absence was palpable. Each missed call or delayed message felt like a widening gap between our worlds. Yet, we persevered, driven by a love that felt like it could overcome even the staunchest barriers. Maintaining our bond across continents presented logistical and emotional challenges. Scheduling calls across different time zones required meticulous planning and often led to sleep-deprived nights. Each missed connection or delayed response sowed tiny seeds of doubt and loneliness, testing our resolve. The physical absence was a constant ache, an empty space that no amount of digital communication could fully satiate. Yet, our commitment didn't waver. We filled letters with dreams of reunions and plans for a future where distance would no longer separate us. Parallel to this, the pressures from my parents about marriage and expectations began to intensify. Raised in a world where social status and connections were paramount, they viewed marriage not just as a union of two individuals but as a strategic alliance that could enhance familial prestige and economic opportunities. They were unaware of the depth of my relationship with Darren, a fact I kept hidden, knowing well their expectations. Back home, the pressure from my parents didn't wane. They were unaware of the depth of my relationship with Darren but sensed my increasing distraction. We hope you understand the importance of choosing someone suitable, my mother would often remind me, her tone both caring and cautionary. Someone who understands our way of life and can uphold the responsibilities that come with our family name. Their hints were not subtle, often dropping names of eligible bachelors from families whose social credentials matched or exceeded our own. Each mention of a potential match was a clear signal of their expectations. They envisioned a partner for me who was not just a companion but a strategic alliance, someone who could merge wealth and influence as adeptly as they had. Among these suggestions was Vuthi, a man whose social and financial stature impeccably matched the criteria set by my family. Their idea of a suitable match was someone like Vuthi, a family friend who was the epitome of propriety and social stature. Vuthi was well aware of the unspoken rules of our social circle. His life trajectory meticulously planned to uphold and advance his family's legacy. My parents often hinted at the benefits of such a match. Vuthi's accomplishments and his family's esteemed position in society. They stressed the importance of preserving our lifestyle and the responsibilities that came with our heritage, often making pointed remarks about the advantages of marrying someone who understood our values. Each mention of Vuthi, or any other eligible bachelor, was a clear reminder of the life they envisioned for me, a life that felt increasingly at odds with the one I imagined with Darren. As these two contrasting expectations collided, I found myself caught in a tumultuous internal struggle. Choosing Darren meant defying familial expectations and facing potential ostracism. Choosing to comply meant sacrificing a love that felt once in a lifetime. This conflict laid the groundwork for a decision that would not only define my future, but also challenge the very foundations of my identity and values. As the months passed, the dichotomy between my secret love for Darren and my public facade of the dutiful daughter grew starker. Each conversation about my future, laden with implications of duty and tradition, felt like a gentle nudge towards a path that I was increasingly unsure I wanted to follow. Yet, the thought of disappointing my parents, of turning my back on the life they had envisioned for me, was daunting. Caught between the deep, genuine love I had for Darren and the weight of familial expectations, I stood at a crossroads, not just of choice, but of identity and true desire. After our semester in Italy came to an end, Darren and I found ourselves back in our respective countries, him in Canada and me in the US. We were now separated by thousands of miles and several time zones, a vast expanse that transformed our daily interactions from shared coffees and walks through historic streets to texts, emails, and video calls. It was a jarring shift, one that we tackled with a mix of optimism and pragmatic determination. Our relationship, born in the serendipitous freedom of a study abroad program, had to mature quickly in the face of real-world challenges. We established routines to bridge the gap, morning texts to share our dreams from the night before, afternoon recounting our days, and nightly video calls to say good night, often falling asleep with the other still on the screen. This online intimacy became our lifeline, our way of forging a shared daily life despite the physical distance. Important times in our relationship were usually during our trips to see each other. Every so often, either of us would travel to spend a week experiencing the other's life. Darren's first trip to my hometown was one to remember. I showed him my go-to spots, like the snug bookstore that served the best coffee and the secret river trails. Seeing him fit into my life and engage with my world made our relationship seem more real. But these trips also showed the differences in our lives. Darren's laid-back attitude contrasted with the more serious formal manners in my social circles. One night, at a dinner party my parents held with their friends, it became clear that our backgrounds were quite different. Darren, who loves to chat, started talking about a political topic that people in this group normally avoid. The atmosphere in the room changed. You could almost hear people's silent judgment. Afterwards, my mom pulled me aside, looking both worried and irritated. She said, "Darren is a charming fellow, but he doesn't get our customs. This isn't just about being polite, Doria, it's about finding someone who can fit into our world," she told me gently. Despite these challenges, Darren and I continued to find joy in our shared moments, whether virtual or in person. One significant moment was our shared birthday celebration. We had birthdays just days apart. Darren surprised me by arranging a virtual dinner date. He sent the same meal to my apartment from a local gourmet restaurant, and we dressed up as if going out. We ate, laughed, and opened gifts over video, creating a sense of closeness that defied the physical miles between us. Yet the strain of maintaining such a relationship was never far from the surface. Each goodbye at the end of visits grew harder, the return to our separate lives more jarring. Our digital communications, while vital, couldn't fully compensate for the lack of physical presence. We began to face the inevitable frustrations and miscommunications that come with long-distance relationships. Messages could be misinterpreted, and delays in replies often spiraled into unnecessary conflicts. Amidst this, the pressure from my parents didn't wane. They watched my growing attachment to Darren with increasing disapproval. After one particularly poignant departure from Darren, they sat me down for a talk that felt more like an intervention. "We know you care for him," my father began, his tone serious, "but consider your future, Doria. Think about the stability and opportunities the right marriage can bring." They mentioned Vuthi again, highlighting his recent successes and how well he was positioned to take over his family's business empire. "You need someone who understands the responsibilities that come with your status. Someone who can be more than just a romantic partner," my mother added, her voice a mix of pity and pragmatism. "Vuthi is coming to the next gala. Spend some time with him, for your own sake." These conversations left me torn. I loved Darren, but the weight of my parents' expectations and the practicalities they presented were difficult to dismiss. Was I being naive in holding onto a relationship that was so fraught with challenges, or was it braver to stick to a path that felt true to my heart, even if it was laden with obstacles? The conflict was not just about choosing between two men. It was about reconciling two very different visions of love and life. Each path offered its own set of rewards and regrets, and choosing felt like an impossible task. As months turned into a year, the pressure from my parents began to mount with an intensity that couldn't be ignored. Their initial hints and subtle nudges about finding a suitable partner soon evolved into overt conversations and undeniable demands. Each time Darren and I faced a hurdle or a misunderstanding, intensified by the distance, my parents' voices grew louder, their arguments more forceful. One Sunday afternoon, over a seemingly benign lunch, my father took the opportunity to articulate his growing concerns. Doria, you must think about your future, he started, his voice firm, yet laced with a sincerity that suggested he was motivated by concern rather than control. This relationship with Darren, it's unsustainable in the long run. You are bound by duty, not just to your family, but to your future. The way he spoke of duty, it felt as though he viewed my relationship as a whimsical phase, one that needed to be corrected before I veered too far from the prescribed path. My mother, ever the diplomat, chimed in gently. We only want what's best for you, darling, someone who can be present, who shares your background and understands the life you are accustomed to. Her words meant to soothe, only added weight to the burden of choice that lay heavily on my shoulders. The arguments caused a lot of inner turmoil for me. On the one side, there was Darren, who brought joy and real connection into my life. He loved me for just being me, not because of my money or social status. On the other side were my parents, who had made successful, strategic alliances throughout their lives and wanted the same for me. The idea of letting them down and breaking away from our family's traditions and expectations was scary, but the thought of losing Darren was just as scary. I felt like I needed his love as much as I needed air to breathe. During this time of confusion, my parents introduced me to Vuthi, an old family friend who was a regular in our social group. He was as much a part of our social scene as the art that decorated our house. Vuthi was everything my parents respected, a successful businessman, smart and well-mannered. He was refined and his discussions were full of talk about the stock market and cultural investments. He was very polite. One night, my parents held a dinner party to officially introduce me to Vuthi. They invited a few others, but it was clear this event was meant for Vuthi and me to get to know each other. Vuthi was nice. He was careful in his approach and showed polite interest in what I did. He talked about operas, fundraisers, and recent business events he'd been to. These subjects were ones I knew about, but they were quite different from the deep chats I had with Darren about our dreams, music and places we wanted to visit. Seeing Vuthi in our fancy dining room, chatting easily with people who had a lot of power and clout, I couldn't help but compare him to Darren. Darren's eyes lit up when he talked about non-traditional ideas, while Vuthi had a very calm look in his eyes. Darren made me laugh with his impersonations and spontaneous humor, while Vuthi's smile, although friendly, felt practiced. My parents watched us, approvingly nodding every time Vuthi and I had a polite conversation. I realized then that my parents saw Vuthi as the perfect choice for me. They believed he both understood and was a part of the world they highly valued. You've been sick so often, Lisa, I'm sorry. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and I felt a sting in my nose, quickly wiping away the tears welling up in my eyes. I had grown up and gradually understood my mother's suffering. I loved her very much. In front of her, I always tried to be strong, so she wouldn't worry. Seeing her frail back, her tender care for me, and her graying hair, I couldn't hold back any longer. I burst into tears, like a child. I hugged my mother tightly, and she cried too, continuously stroking my back. Lisa, my dear, don't cry. You've been through so much, haven't you? I love you so much, and I'm so sorry. You have nothing to apologize for, Mom. I love you so much too, I managed to say, through my sobs. We hugged each other, crying uncontrollably. I heard my mother's sobs echoing in my ears, and slowly I regained consciousness and woke up. The light was blinding, but the warmth of my mother's presence made me feel safe and loved. Oh, my beloved daughter, you're awake. My daughter is awake. Lily, go call the doctor. My mother held my hand, looking at me lovingly, with tearful eyes. I felt the warmth, the love of my mother, a sacred affection that comforted my soul. Her presence was like a beacon of hope, pulling me out of the darkness I had been engulfed in. The doctor came, checked my pupils, blood pressure, and pulse. He said I was fine. Thanks to my mother's timely discovery and bringing me to the hospital, my life was saved. I had been in the emergency room for about 4 hours, and then remained in a coma for 50 hours. During that time, facing death, I had dreams about the things I had experienced, and I realized I wanted to live. I no longer wanted to die. I wanted to live for myself, for my mother, and for those who loved me. The painful experiences that happened to me were not something anyone wished for. It wasn't my fault, but I had to accept and overcome my destiny. Through the window of the hospital room, I watched the sky outside and took a deep breath. Around me were patients fighting illness day and night to cling to life. I felt truly regretful. Seeing their struggle, I realized how precious life is and how much I had taken it for granted. How are you feeling? My mother asked, her voice filled with concern and relief. I'm fine now, I'm sorry. I'll never worry you like this again, I responded, my voice weak, but sincere. I'm sorry too, Lisa. Oh, your father came to visit you. He also regrets everything that happened, she said, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and hope. I accidentally looked out of the hospital room and saw my father standing outside watching me. Seeing me, he turned around. Yuiki. I ran after him, my body still weak, but driven by a need to confront. Doria, it sounds like you're trying to convince yourself that duty should outweigh your heart, Yuiki observed thoughtfully. But I've seen you with Darren. You light up in a way that's so rare. Are you sure you can give that up for expectations that don't even make you happy? Another friend, Miha, offered a different take during a long walk through the park. Think about the long term, Doria. Love is critical, sure, but so is a shared life. Can Darren offer you not just love, but also a partnership that aligns with your aspirations and lifestyle? Each conversation left me more conflicted than the last, feeling torn between the ideals of romantic love and the practicalities of a shared future within my social standing. My nights were restless, filled with dreams of different scenarios playing out, some ending in happiness and others in regret. Moments of doubt crept in often. There were days I'd find myself at my desk, staring out the window, lost in thoughts about whether my feelings for Darren were amplified by the drama of our situation. Was it the thrill of the forbidden and the challenge of distance that made our connection feel more intense? Or was it truly the once in a lifetime love it seemed to be? I questioned, too, my apprehensions about Vuthi. Was I being unfair to him, judging our potential future not by what it could genuinely offer, but by what it lacked in passion compared to what I had with Darren? Vuthi had never been anything but kind and considerate towards me. Could there be a deeper connection there, one that I hadn't allowed myself to explore fully because of my feelings for Darren? One night, when I felt especially stressed, I sat down at my piano. I've often found peace there. My fingers moved across the keys. The music seemed to tell a story of possibilities and sadness, like a mirror of the storm inside me. In that calm moment, guided by the sad tunes, I realized no amount of thinking could tell me the right choice. The question was what I could stand to lose and what I couldn't live without. This problem wasn't just about choosing between two men. It was more about deciding the kind of life I wanted to live. Was I willing to lose a love that filled my heart, to keep my family's approval and the comfort of my social group? Or was I ready to deal with the fallout of putting my happiness first, in a way that might not meet expectations? Each choice had potential gains and potential losses, and choosing felt like walking a tightrope between what my heart wanted and what my responsibilities were. The decision, when it came, was neither dramatic nor sudden. It was a quiet realization, a slow, painful acknowledgement of the realities that Darren and I faced. The turning point happened during our usual video call, a call that started like any other, with smiles and stories about our day, but underneath, there was a weight, a pressure that neither of us could ignore. Darren was the first to break the silence on the matter. He sounded as if he'd given up. Doria, I've been thinking a lot about us, about the distance, and everything your family expects from you, from us, he said hesitantly. He paused, taking a deep breath, before continuing. I know about Vuthi, and I can't help feeling like I'm holding you back from a life that might be better suited for you, one that's expected of you. The honesty in his words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they echoed the fears and doubts I'd harbored in silence. It hurt to think that Darren might feel unworthy, or less than what I should have, because of the world I was a part of. Darren, you've never held me back. If anything, you've pushed me to be more myself than I ever was before. I replied, my voice choked with feelings. But that's just it, isn't it? Darren sighed, his face somber on the screen. I love you, Doria, more than I thought possible. But loving someone also means considering what's best for them, and with all this distance, and your parents, and now Vuthi, I can't shake the feeling that I might not be what's best for you. The talk that came next was one of the toughest I'd ever had. We talked about old times. We fought, we cried. It was an overflow of feelings, every word heavy with memories of our time together. By the time we finished talking, we had decided, Darren and I would say goodbye, not out of hate or because we'd hurt each other, but because we both recognized, even though it was painful, that our circumstances meant we had to take different paths. After we hung up, the reality of our breakup filled me with a deep emptiness. I sat by myself, in the quiet of my room, feeling as if a part of me was forever gone. The days that came after were a haze of feeling nothing and crying, each morning a reminder of the absence of his message, each night a time of being alone. Going from the deep, emotional bond I had with Darren to the formal, polite talks with Vuthi was tough. My parents, seeing my change in behavior, were quick to help and support this new relationship. Vuthi was always a gentleman, respectful and thoughtful in the way he interacted with me. He was everything my parents liked and everything a good match should be. Our initial outings were filled with awkward formality, highlighting the lack of the easygoing laughter I'd always had with Darren. I kept comparing the Two relationships, which only made me feel more distant from Vuthi, despite his good qualities, and the fact that our social classes were a good match. However, as I spent more time with Vuthi, going to events and family get-togethers, where he was gladly received, I started to kind of like not having to fight. In this new setting, there was no need to explain or defend our relationship. It was accepted, even expected. Vuthi's understanding of my world, his easy way of dealing with the social groups I was part of, brought a certain comfort I hadn't known I missed. During these times of talking, I began to see parts of a possible future, one which was surely different from what I had pictured with Darren, but not without its own kind of happiness. It was a future built on similar backgrounds, mutual respect, and maybe a deeper affection could develop from our matching lives. With time, deciding to end things with Darren and start a new part of my life with Vuthi was filled with emotional chaos and doubts, but it was also a choice formed by an understanding of my own values and the truths of the world I lived in. It was an acknowledgement that sometimes love is not just about passion and connection, but also about making choices that align with one's broader life path. As I moved forward with Vuthi, I held on to the hope that this new relationship, while different, could also be fulfilling in its own right, and that maybe, just maybe, it could grow into something meaningful and lasting. The weeks following my decision to end things with Darren and begin a relationship with Vuthi felt like walking through a haze. Each day was marked by a cocktail of emotions, including regret over what I had lost, some relief at not having to constantly defend my relationship, and constant worry about whether I'd made the right decision. Emotionally, I was drained. Memories of Darren haunted me. Small things like a title, game we both loved, or topics we talked about, would make me feel deeply sad. Despite these pangs, there was also some relief. Not because the relationship with Darren was over, but because I no longer had to go against my parents' hopes and what society thought was correct. This relief, though, was touched with sadness and guilt, like maybe I'd chosen the easier path, deciding to fit in rather than fighting for what my heart truly wanted. When I started dating Vuthi, my family's attitude changed from quiet disapproval to warm approval. My parents became more open and talkative, showing off Vuthi at social events, a welcome Darren never received. Our family get-togethers became nicer, with talks about future plans, instead of arguing. However, this piece left me feeling conflicted. While I appreciated the newfound tranquility within my family and the social acceptance it brought, I also questioned whether this comfort had come at the expense of my genuine happiness. The approval from my friends and family was gratifying, yet it made me wonder if I had compromised my true self to gain their acceptance. My thinking about these sacrifices showed me that my choice wasn't just about choosing a partner, but balancing love, responsibility, and personal happiness too. I saw that while I had a stable and accepted relationship, I had lost a love full of passion and challenges. This sharp exchange made me think deeply about the things I valued and those I had traded. During this reflective time, I came to some significant personal insights. I discovered that I had the ability to make difficult decisions and the determination to follow through on them. I also faced my vulnerabilities, notably my deep-seated need for parental and societal validation. This understanding made me recognize how closely my identity was tied to my family's expectations, yet it also ignited a desire for more genuine self-expression. In the end, this journey taught me that personal growth often comes from the toughest choices. It gave me a better understanding of the complexities of human relationships, the nuances of love, and the often difficult path of self-discovery. This experience showed me that every choice comes with gains and losses, and real growth needs accepting this truth, learning from it, and moving forward with a better understanding of one's desires and values. As the days became months, my public acceptance of choosing to be with Vuthi did little to calm the internal unrest that stuck around like an unfinished song. On the outside, I played the role expected of me, a girlfriend for a man who matched every the boxes my family had set. Vuthi was everything a woman in my shoes could want: kind, successful, and supportive. But deep down, there was a piece of me that remained unsettled, a whisper of what could have been that refused to be silenced. In the middle of these conflicting feelings, I couldn't help myself contacting Darren. It began with a careful message, a simple, "How are you?" that paved the way for more frequent chats. Darren, with his ever-generous heart, welcomed our interaction without hesitation. He listened as I shared my thoughts and feelings, the joy and the compromises, the fulfillment and the voids. These conversations became my refuge, a space where I could express my true self without the weight of expectations. Darren and I found a new pattern, a friendship that let me think about the roads not taken without having to worry about commitment. He understood my situation with Vuthi and offered help, urging me to find happiness wherever it may be. This touch with Darren, while very different from our old romance, brought me a sense of peace. It was a connection to who I used to be, to the dreams we once had. The future of my relationships with Vuthi and Darren is uncertain. With Vuthi, I am the girlfriend he deserves on the surface, but deep down, there are parts of my heart that he has never reached. With Darren, the love has changed into a non-romantic, yet deep affection that respects the past, but doesn't try to reinvent it. The difference in these relationships mirror the inner fight between responsibility and personal want, a balance I try to find every day. Thinking about this journey, I've learned that love is not always about extreme passion, but about understanding and growing. Duty is not just about meeting other people's hopes, but about fitting them with one's own happiness roadmap. This revelation has been both releasing and tough. It has taught me that personal contentment doesn't only come from sticking perfectly to any one ideal, such as love or duty, but from the courage to admit and live with one's choices. In the quiet thinking about my experiences, I find a new thankfulness for the complexity of human feelings and relationships. Love can change, duty can progress, and fulfillment can come from the most surprising places. The key, I've learned, is to stay open to the chances of change and growth. As I think about the future, I hold on to a little hope. Hope that the choices I make, guided by both my heart and my responsibilities, will bring me to a place where I can accept all parts of my life, whether with Vuthi, Darren, or just myself. I am determined to seek a life that is not only acceptable, but truly fulfilling. The journey isn't about finding the perfect balance, but about handling the imperfections with grace and authenticity. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.